going to read the following statement on behalf of the family and friends of Danquirs Franklin. His mother Deborah is behind me, cousin Patty Barnett, and her husband James Barnett, who was much like a father figure to Danquirs, and then other friends. Danquirs Franklin should be alive today. As those who knew him well, we were disappointed by the district attorney's assessment of the circumstances of his death and utterly dismayed in the way in which he has been portrayed. The investigation never uncovered the betrayal that so upset Danquirs that day, and the public does not understand that when the police arrived, the situation had calmed, that he had put the gun away, that he was in prayer with the manager of the store, and the mother of his children was standing close by because she knew that the threat was over. But the police then shot Danquirs because they ordered him to produce the gun that he had put away. And in the process of slowly taking that gun out, they shot and killed him. The public needs to understand some facts that have been lost in this story since the shooting and then the coverage last week about the district attorney's decision not to charge. The first is people do not understand who Danquirs was. He was a hardworking, serious, responsible adult who was raising 3 children that he had with the mother of those children, providing a home for them and holding a single job for over a decade. And he was upset over a betrayal that I think anyone who's ever been in a relationship with someone for a long time would understand. That the mother of his children had decided to have an affair with a coworker at the Burger King, that the news of that decision had so upset Danquirs that he had actually turned himself in voluntarily to mental health because he was afraid he was going to hurt himself because of how upset he was. His mother was not able to provide for the children, so they agreed that she would stay at the house with the kids at night while he was at his longtime job. And he found out the day of this incident from one of his children that the boyfriend who was ruining his relationship with the mother of these children had been in his bed with his mother while he was at work. And that so upset him that he went to the Burger King that day to find that man. The footage of him in the Burger King being upset and getting on the counter and being angry is the image in the public's mind. But the thing to keep in mind is that he never shot that gun. He had never hurt anyone in his lifetime. And that after the lover ran from the Burger King and left the property, that he went from being angry to just being tearful and despondent and put the gun away. And when the manager of the store showed up in a vehicle, he went to him and they embraced. And he cried. And he was in prayer when the police arrived and began to order him to drop the weapon. And if you listen to that tape, you'll see again and again that the only command he was given by the police was to drop the weapon. And sadly, the only way that he could drop the weapon was to reach into his pocket and pull it out. And I believe the district attorney's frame-by-frame analysis of what happened assumes that it was a 1/10 of a second from the time when the gun came out of his pocket until he was shot. And that frame shows him holding the gun between his index finger and his thumb with the barrel pointed toward him as he's pulling it out of the pocket, and he was instantly shot and killed, doing what he was ordered to do. We're not here to second guess the decision of the district attorney as to whether to charge the officers involved, in particular Officer Curl as the shooter. But we're here today because we believe that Danquirs should still be alive, and that the community needs to understand that. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Will the family be pursuing any civil
We haven't reached that decision yet. Obviously, it's something we're thinking about very seriously.
In your document, you mentioned what you thought the officer should have done rather than say put the gun down. Can you tell us about that?
Well, I think the chief even said this himself when this case initially hit the press, was that he wished it had been handled differently, that the obvious command is to show us your hands, put your hands up. And if he had showed his hands, they would have seen that he didn't have the gun in his hands, and that the situation would have been handled completely differently in that respect, because it's an easy way to go from that to making sure he doesn't reach for the gun and acts in a way that they know they're safe and that they can take control of him. And that's what should have happened in this situation, and he would still be alive.
Actually, I have a question for the family. Are they open to?
I would rather not. If I can try to answer for you, but
In as much as you can speak on their behalf, Luke, what has it been like for them to live with this? Really to say nothing and be very, very quiet. What has to be a very difficult time.
well, there's two things. One is, particularly for Deborah, the grandmother of these children, to sort of be having to take responsibility of them and take them into her life is an unexpected challenge, and a burden she takes because she loves the kids, but it's something that she did not expect. And they have remained very quiet and respectful in this process. They're not interested in stirring up any anger or community frustration. We're trying to get to the bottom of what happened and whether it was handled properly is what they are interested in. And we went and met with the district attorney, sat and listened to what he said, had a lot of questions about the way it was handled. And they made clear that they were not assessing whether it was handled properly by the police. They were only deciding whether there was a basis to charge Officer Curl criminally, and felt that they could not. And so we're now on to this next phase. We'll see how Internal Affairs handles it, what decision they reach. They will give a decision to Ms. Franklin when they reach one. And then we'll sort of see where it goes from there.
Did they give you a timeline on that?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, that's something for CMPD. You know, they're in their own process. They have this kind of Chinese wall thing where they have an internal affairs investigation going on while the DA is doing the criminal investigation. And they're somewhat different in that they're looking at CMPD policies and how they apply, but they're using all the same interviews, all the same footage, you know, all that kind of thing in assessing it.
I know you said you weren't here to second guess what the DA's decision was, but I mean, based on your statement, would you have liked to see something else done, a different response? And so, what would that response be?
I mean, I really don't want to second guess Spencer's decision. I think that I understand where he's coming from. I think that there's a misapprehension of the way, there's often this recital to Graham v. Connor, which is this, actually ironically, a Charlotte case that went to the Supreme Court years ago about an officer, you know, the objective reasonableness of an officer's conduct. I don't think that's the civil standard. I'm not sure why it constantly gets sort of thrown in. To me, there would be a question that if she did not follow procedures correctly, whether it was a negligent, you know, a manslaughter type case, of whether the mistakes and negligence led to an unnecessary death. But they, you know, for their own reasons have decided not to pursue that. It is the rare case in this nation where an officer is charged. You know, and there's all sorts of institutional reasons behind that, I think.
Two-part question. Has the family ever thought about having the FBI come in and investigate? And then also, what would the family like to see CMPD do moving forward? What do they want to see done?
You really can't ask the FBI to get involved. That would be up to the district attorney to do that, because they're an agency of the state, so, and he is an officer of the state, so they won't respond to a private request.
Or even any other outside agency?
Now, there's really not a way to do that, and it's one of the things I think when Spencer was running for DA, there was some discussion about whether there should be some sort of outside review, but the process remains the same. And CMPD is one of the few places in the state where they handle it internally rather than having the FBI come in. And part of that, I think, is a function the department's big enough that they have this division that they feel they can rely upon. But it is, you know, it's within the organization, and I think there's some institutional incentive that you've support the organization in that process rather than be really critical of it.
A two-part question
Sure.
as well. So when we talk about the internal investigation going on in CMPD, is there any outcome that the family is hoping for specifically as far as policy?
That was, I think, the other part of the question I didn't get to. But, I mean, I think that they would like to see whether there's an honest assessment as to whether policy and procedure was followed in the commands given, in the way it was handled. I don't know that they particularly want to see the officer punished in some way, but just the department to understand and address that this situation should not have unfolded as it did.
Mm-hmm. And the reference to the surveillance or the general manager and Mr. Franklin embracing and having a moment, is that on surveillance footage that was seen?
It's not on the body camera.
Right.
I believe that when there is a sort of a, I can't remember the term for these, but there are these surveillance cameras in different parts of the city, and one was alerted when this call came in. And you can see, as I understand from the surveillance camera, as Mr. Franklin goes over and kneels down to the car, whether you can see from the angle of them embracing, but several witnesses, including Mr. Greer, admit that they hugged. I mean, there's no real dispute about that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you think that justice has been served at all this?
Well, we're only in the beginning of that process. I don't think, I had cautioned the family, I think it was very, very unrealistic to expect a criminal charge in a shooting like this. And you can see that the rancor within the department with the Jonathan Farrell charge, I mean, it just created a lot of discord within the department, a feeling that the department wasn't standing by the officer, and that had all sorts of repercussions. So I think there's a lot of very, very careful consideration as to whether to charge an officer.
I think the public just would really love to hear just some statement from the family, as far as just more emotionally. Is there any way anyone would be willing to?
Not today, thank you. I understand that, but not today.
And as far as Mr. Franklin's girlfriend or partner, the statement in the statement that you gave us today, where it said that she had sort of withheld some information from investigators, can you give us any more on that? I mean, how do you know that that information wasn't passed along to investigators?
There's nothing in the district attorney's investigation where they understood why he was at the school, why he was upset. And there was a very simple reason. This guy had been in his bed with the mother of his children. And she did not disclose that to anyone. And there was just this assumption he's upset and no real digging into what was going on. And I'm not sure from the police department's perspective what they're assessing is the response of the officers to the information they had when they got at the scene. But I think from the community's perspective, to understand why he was so upset is just so important, I think, that this was a human tragedy related to these relationship issues that people just, I think, would understand if they understood that. Jane, you want?
Moving back to the SBI, because I believe CMPD has said repeatedly over the years that the only way they'll bring in the SBI is at the family's request. Are you saying that wasn't an option?
Oh, that's an interesting point. I'm really not aware of that. I mean, as you're saying that, I'm remembering there'd be some position about that, but I have never known of CMPD to agree to bring in the SBI to do an investigation. Whether they would or not, I don't know, but that's just never been an expectation or understanding. Mark, you have something?
Yeah, look, I'll let my friend with the big red truck get by first. But again, in today's culture, in what has happened nationally, and the national climate we're in, with police and particularly people of color being shot under questionable circumstances, it is remarkable that this has been the response of the family has been peaceful, and that there has been no real public angst. What is the message for the community from the family, if you can say it? Because it has been, I think, again, to commend them, Mark.
These are all people who live and function in the society in a way that they work hard, they understand sort of the way that processes have to work. And they did not see a value in creating, an outraged public, fueling an outraged public response to a situation that to them was just completely tragic. And they wanted to grieve the loss of Danquirs and to begin a process to see what could be done about it, and not making it their grief a public issue, I think is the simplest way to do it. They have been frustrated in here, and why we decided to do this today is that they've stayed silent, and there's been no kind of counterbalance to the image of this case, and why we decided to finally do this today to give some context to what actually happened. And so this is their public statement today, I guess.
Was it upsetting for the family to read that 150-page document, especially elements where the DA touched on Danquirs' mental state, for lack of a better term, prior to the incident?
Yeah, I think especially to release information about health issues without consent was very concerning. And again, for them to do that and not understand the context completely of what happened, and this betrayal that happened after he got out of the hospital, where he had taken himself to protect himself and others from his emotions. And then he learns this additional fact that just led him to be, outraged that day.
I'm sorry, when you say without permission, the DA's office was able to get this record?
They were able to get the records as part of sort of their investigative process.
Sure.
There's a way of doing that. I think the concern is more of disclosing public information, personal health information publicly without prior approval of the family. That's upsetting. Yeah.
Would you also mind just for context, as far as identifying
Sure.
who is who?
From my left, this is James Barnett, who is the cousin-in-law, if you will, but he's the one who he was very, very involved in these events in the days leading up to it. He's been a mentor and a sounding board for Danquirs for years. His wife, Patty, who's the cousin of the mom in the middle here, Deborah. And then you introduce these folks. They walked up. I haven't had a chance. These are family friends. Your name is?
Family friends, and I'm like a mother to Deborah. And after the passing of her mother, and Danquirs is just like a son, grandson to me.
And your name for the record?
My name is Sandra Lamont, and this is Denise Johnson, a friend of the family.
Sandra Lamont.
Lamont.
Yes.
And Denise Johnson.
And just to be very clear, you're saying that the district attorney had no knowledge of the events leading up to the actual going to the Burger King, why he was enraged. That's your understanding?
From the meeting with them and from reviewing the report, there's been no reference to that at all, and no understanding of that. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.